here, I'm a little nervous, so I brought my emotional support armadillo that I got from my mother back in Mission, Texas. It's a dear thing. I like to bring it to me whenever I have a nervous activity. So what I'm going to be talking about is sex advice I got from my parents. And my parents split up before I was 3 years old, and my mother stayed in Mission, Texas, and my father moved to New York City of all places, and I never saw them together. And so what happened was that the only times I heard them interacting was usually when they were arguing about money or education or religion. And so it was a little bit like listening to music with headphones on. Out of one ear, I'm listening to Dean Martin music that my mother liked. On the other ear, I was listening to opera that my father liked. So my mother had a very practical and earthy approach to sexuality. And she left the birds and the bees information to our family pediatrician. So I can still remember how shook up my brother and I were back in the 1960s when we got these sex brochures, sex health brochures from the pediatrician, and they had all these 1960s style drawings explaining human sexuality. You know, there's a penis, the vagina, the breasts, the lactation, birth. It was really horrifying. And so what we did, we were so embarrassed by this that we put them in a closet so we wouldn't see them under a stack of Playboys. So that way we wouldn't have to think about sexuality. Years later, when I was about to go to Princeton University, my mother left me with one piece of advice. She said, Van, in her Lady Bird Johnson accent, don't get anybody pregnant. That's it, one line of advice. And back in the 1970s, after Princeton had gone co-ed, the sex ratio was 80-20. So the odds of getting somebody pregnant were just about zero, if not less. My father, however, had a very different view toward things. He styled himself as a European kind of sophisticate who was the kind of man who would want to introduce his sons to a very kind of French Brigitte Bardot kind of woman who would very available and very sexual. My father also wanted to tell us about the birds and the bees. So one time my brother and I were with him. He took us to Miami Beach to visit his parents, who were these typical Jewish immigrant parents living on Collins Avenue in Miami Beach, if you know that area. And so what Dad did was he took us to the Fontainebleau Hotel, which is a renowned place. He set us down in the lobby and he gave us his version of the birds and the bees. He told us three things. He said, one, it's okay to have homosexual affairs. Two, go to nudist camps. And three, have affairs with beautiful older women. Now, given that my brother and I were from a very conservative town in South Texas, this sounded like the ravings of a madman. I remember sitting in our Art Deco chairs in the lobby and I was gripping it so hard, I almost pulled the stuffing out of the chair. So it was a very odd set of advice. So after that, my brother decided to stay in Texas for the summer, but I came back because I was thinking about college interviews. I love visiting him in New York. But I found out that what he was talking about with his advice in Miami Beach, he was deadly serious about it. He really thought that was how things should be done. So what he did, and I found out how serious he was about this one day, when he took me to Alexander's department store, which hasn't existed in a long time, and he took me to the toys and games section, and he said, Van Wall, which is like we found a woman for you. And it turns out he found the physical therapist, a friend of his. He said, we're going to have him, this woman is available to spend the night with you. I was 17 years old, horny, but I thought, I kind of like it. It's like letters to penthouse material. But I thought, this isn't about sexuality, this is about control. And so I passed up the opportunity of a lifetime, for anybody. But I wound up leaving New York. I didn't lose my cherry, but I didn't lose my self-respect. And you know what? The beautiful older women came later. Thank you.
Yeah.